Hey, what's going on YouTube? Today I'm going to show you my Magicka Sorcerer, also known as Magsorc, PVE DPS build for the Ascending Tides DLC patch. This build is capable of pulling over 80k on the parse dummy with an easy, beginner-friendly rotation. As a part of the beginner setup series, I'll be focusing on a starting rotation and gear that are all easily accessible. This build is best suited for those who are interested in starting their group content journey, meaning this is not a leveling guide and assumes you have some sort of access to at least crafted gear at CP 160. For the sake of this theme and to be as new player friendly as possible, I'll be avoiding mythics, arena weapons, trial, or dungeon gear for the initial setup. Furthermore, the rotation for many classes will be simplified. The build specializes in normal group content such as trials, dungeons, and group arenas. This build works great in overland but is not specifically designed for it. Furthermore, I'll be going over some ideas and tips to further progress yourself into mid and end game. Although hybrid builds are some of the strongest builds right now, I'll be focusing on a more traditional setup that either focuses on Magicka or stamina. The reason is it's easier to focus on one resource than trying to manage two. With that being said, here we go. Starting off in the character sheet, I have 64 points in a Magicka and I'm running the Thief Mundus. So for the race for this particular build, I am a High Elf. Other alternatives include Dark Elf, Khajiit, Breton, but to be honest, race is such a small factor that it's not really important. So moving on to potions. For potions, we're just going to be using standard Essence of Spell Power for content. The reason is it gives us access to 3 important buffs for Magicka DPS. These include Major Intellect, Major Sorcery, and Major Prophecy. Please keep in mind that these potions do cost a little bit to make or buy, so it's important to have 3 points in a medicinal use. This is found in the alchemy skill line to ensure that you get the full duration of the buffs. Moving on to food. So for content, we have 2 options. Clockwork Citrus Fillet. This is going to be your expensive option but provides just marginally better stats than Witch Mother's Potent Brew, which is a cheaper and almost just as good alternative. And lastly, if you're parsing or need more sustain, Ghastly Eyeball is always the go-to. So for CP, we're going to be running Backstabber, Wrathful Strikes, Deadly Aim, and Master at Arms. And for the red tree, Sustained by Suffering, Siphoning Spells, Rejuvenation, and Boundless Vitality. So for the gear, we're going to be running 5 pieces of Julianos paired with 5 pieces of Order's Wrath and 2 pieces of Night Mother. So breaking it down, on the front bar, I have a Julianos Dagger with a flame damage enchant traded in Nirnhoned. On the offhand, we have Julianos Dagger with a poison damage enchant traded in Charged. Make sure Nirnhoned is on the front bar to benefit from the trait. On the back bar, we have a Julianos Inferno Staff with an increased weapon and spell damage enchant traded in Infused. For the body, we have 5 pieces of Order's Wrath, all with max mag enchants in Light traded in Divines. And we have 2 pieces of Night Mother, both with max mag enchants, 1 medium, 1 light, and the trait is going to be Divines. And for the jewelry, we're running 3 pieces of Julianos Jewelry, all with spell damage enchants traded in Bloodthirsty. So for skills, we're going to be running Daedric Prey, Crystal Fragments, Endless Fury, Volatile Familiar, Twilight Tormentor, Flawless Dawnbreaker. On the back bar, Barbed Trap, Unstable Wall of Fire, Hurricane, Volatile Familiar again, Twilight Tormentor, and Greater Storm Atronach. So for the rotation, we're going to start off with our back bar dots. These are Barbed Trap into Unstable Wall of Fire, into Hurricane, and then bar swap into Daedric Prey, Volatile Familiar, and 12 Crystal Fragments. Whenever you have your ultimate, Greater Storm Atronach ready, just replace one of the Crystal Frags with it. And lastly, at 20%, also known as Execute, use Endless Fury instead of Crystal Frags for just a little bit extra DPS. So usually I'd put in a mid-game section, but because Order's Wrath is such a good set, it won't be replaced until we hit closer to endgame. This is where we have a few options. To make this more simple, I'll be focusing on a traditional Magicka setup, wearing light armor. Medium armor is pulling ahead in DPS right now, but managing 2 resources can be quite hard. Furthermore, it takes away the option to play at range, so I'm not going to include that into this build. So from here, you have a few options. First, I'll talk about body sets. Body sets are basically sets that are worn on the body. This means 5 pieces are active at all times. Furthermore, these sets should ultimately have Minor Slayer to benefit from the extra damage to bosses. Therefore, we realistically only have 2 options. These are Basai from the Trial Rockgrove and Whirl of Depth from the Dread Reef Sail trial. They're both strong, but Basai requires you to manage your Magicka, while Whirl requires the boss to be semi-stationary. They both have their uses, but Whirl seems to be easier and better option for most situations. Regardless, these are trial sets and running them on normal should be easy and you should work towards getting them if possible. Moving on from here, we have front bar sets, or just sets to pair with either Basai or Whirl. These include Kinra, Pillar of Nirn, Zogvin, and Advancing Yokeda. Out of the list, I think Kinra is the best option, granted you can keep the stacks. Kinra comes from the dungeon Black Drake Villa, Pillar of Nirn comes from Falkreath Hold, Advancing Yokeda comes from Helral Citadel, and Zovgin comes from Frostvault. I'd also like to mention that Zovgin is unique in that it allows us to run a different skill instead of Trap, freeing up a bar slot. And Order's Wrath is actually really good right now, and probably better than Advancing Yokeda. So here's to hoping it doesn't get nerfed. Next is the Mythic and Maelstrom Arena Inferno Staff. Mythics is kind of a pain to get, but they are some of the strongest items in the game. If you're running a Mythic, I'd go for a one-piece Slime Crawl Monster Helm paired with Harpooners. Harpooners is viable for a lot of content and is best in slot for when it is. A good alternative will always be Death Dealer's Fate. I'd also like to quickly mention that Oakensoul Ring is a very viable choice if you want to go the one bar route. And lastly, for Monster Helms, if you don't want to run a Mythic, you have a few options, but Stormfist, Kjarnar, and Maul the Inferno are my personal picks. So closing thoughts, first off, if you don't like daggers or can't use daggers, swapping to an Inferno Staff is always a viable choice. Just make sure it's precise with a flame damage glyph on it. Next, I'm just gonna quickly go over some skills you can swap out for content. The easiest way to get more bar slots is by taking off one of your pets. So skills really quickly, we have Crit Surge and OP Heal, Hardened Ward, a really strong shield, Crushing Shock, an Interrupt if you need one, Mystic Orb if you need some synergies, and Destro Ult if you need more AoE DPS, but Storm Atronach is king for single target. And I think that wraps it up. There will be a parse and an outfit section after this, and thanks for watching, and as always, have a good day.